Oh my, that was Gordon.
Gordon, is it?
Yeah. Hi, Gordon.
I can't see from here.
Oh yeah, he was there earlier.
Hi, yeah, I'm coming back with my video. There's
Hi, Gordon.
there's Grace.
Hi.
There's Grace, my daughter. Uncle Tatsuo, congratulations on the book.
Okay, thank you for
Oh,
your
yeah.
participation.
Wow.
Exciting.
Hi.
Thank you for making time on a weekend.
Yeah, we're very happy to participate. Yeah, it's great. So
We just had the Papa, do you want to show the book?
Yeah.
Show it to him.
Final book.
I have to lift it up.
yeah, that's great. I'm looking forward to getting a copy soon.
It just arrived yesterday in boxes. Yeah. And I also sent the review from the coverage on the Chinese newspaper. I hope that your wife can, maybe Shirley could have a look.
Yeah, for sure.
How old is Grace?
Grace is 14 now.
Enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Oops.
Nice to meet you, Grace.
Nice to meet you too.
I guess I'm your cousin or something. Second. I wish we weren't so far away.
Yeah.
Well, when COVID is over, we're gonna come for a visit out to Vancouver, I hope. We're gonna see everybody. Grace never really met everyone out there. I think she may have been out there when she was a baby, but she hasn't really met everybody.
This is,
Hi, Mariko, Mariko, and Tatsuo.
Hi, Judy.
oh, hi, Judy.
Thanks for joining.
Hi.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. Oh, hi, John.
Hi, Tatsuo.
Hi.
Where's everybody? How do we see them?
Figure out how to make the
Oh, I wonder, Norm, is there a way for us to see everybody yet?
active speaker video. I want to
What are you trying to do?
make it bigger. Like I want,
No, you can't.
how do you make it bigger?
You can't because he's presenting.
Oh,
On the top right, change it to gallery view. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, there's
oh, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaker video. Wow.
Kerry.
Hi.
Oh, hi, John. Oh, so, hi, Shirley. Norm, how do I get back to the Zoom screen, the main screen? So we're fumbling. Oh, nice to see everybody. Oh, Vivian says congratulations. Thank you, Linda from Lillooet. Mikoto.
I like your yellow cup, Judy.
Oh,
We're having yellow cup coffee this morning.
yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's Vivian. Do you know Vivian?
Mm.
Yeah. And oh, Sandra. Hello. Hi, Terry. Hi, Emiko. Okay. Oh, the Mikoto's there. Hi, Mikoto.
Hi.
So Norm, will you be?
Hi.
Hi, Mikoto. Would you be switching to the big main screen shortly, or am I missing something?
When I share screen, everyone will see the share screen, but for now, it seems like everyone wants to chat and
Yeah.
see each other, so I
Shirley,
turned this on.
yeah, thank you. Shirley, thank you for joining and I appreciate you, the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for the invite. This is a very special day and it's just awesome. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of your work too here on this incredible project. Beautiful book, beautiful.
Thank you.
That's great.
So I think we're almost time, isn't it, Norm? Almost.
Almost.
How's everyone doing today? Is everyone doing okay?
Yeah. How are you guys? How are you, Mariko and Tatsuo?
I'm
You
in
okay?
this. I've never done this kind of thing before.
Yeah. Well, this is neat.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Okada, is that?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Hello.
Hello, is that Kevin?
Uh,
Is that your first name? Kevin? Kevin?
Yuki.
Oh, Yuki. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice to meet you. Oh, Ellen.
影さんおめでとうございます。
Okada-san.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
And
Hello, this is Shaylee is here now. Uncle Tatsuo.
Oh,
Uncle Tatsu.
hi, Mikoto. And that's Ellen.
Yes.
Ellen.
Hi, Uncle Tatsu. Hi.
Hi.
well, that's great, hey?
Yeah, Grace is my daughter. We're using her account for the Zoom.
Oh,
Hi,
hi, Kage. Hi, Vivian.
I've been in my dad's bubble, so forgive me. We're safe. We're safe.
Good.
Well,
Hmm.
let me know when. I guess we will just about start, I guess.
You ready?
Wow. Yes. So excited. Thank you all for coming. This is really, really amazing. Do you see everybody, Papa?
Yeah.
Wow. So many people.
No.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
I guess we'll get started. Is that okay, Norm?
Yeah.
And Norm, our tech person, thank you, Norm, for taking care of everything. So shortly, we'll be unmuting muting everyone, but you're in for a lot of good surprises. We have a full agenda here. So officially, I'd like to say good morning. Minasan ohayo gozaimasu.
Sorry, I muted you, Mariko.
Minasan ohayo gozaimasu. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for gathering. I'm here broadcasting from Vancouver, BC this morning. I'd like to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and the Squamish First Nations. And welcome to the official launch of Migration, Displacement, and Redress, a Japanese-Canadian perspective, by Tetsuo Kage. And I am her daughter, Mariko Kage, and I'll be your host. We're conducting this launch with special guests who have pre-recorded their participation. And so we can bring this presentation to you safely within the strictures of the pandemic situation. Now we're going to begin with a welcoming song by my favorite taiko player, Kage Anchan. We need to have the sound, please, Norm. My sister has been playing the taiko for over 35 years.
Welcome everybody to Tetsuo Kage's book launch. My name is Eileen Kage, but I'm known mostly as Anchan or Kage. I'm going to play the taiko to formally open this book launch. Hi. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you so much, Anchan. You're definitely a pride of our family. Now I'm here with my father, and I'm pleased to bring this project forward into publication. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what this book is has written. And before we get started here, bringing together his selected writings, historian, writer, and a human rights advocate, my father, Tetsuo Kage, offers his unique insights into community work from the 1970s to the present day. And I'd like to borrow the words from Satoko Norimatsu, who kindly offered a book review in advance of this release. So she says, this book gently facilitates learning opportunities for peace and reconciliation, so we readers can become a catalyst for positive change in the challenging world that we live in. Also, Dr. Satsuki Ina from Los Angeles offered these comments about the book, saying it is a visionary's journey to reflect on one's history and moral authority to demand that justice be done. So now I'd like to ask my father to give a brief welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for joining this book launch event. I'm very honored and pleased that you join us to celebrate the publication, my humble publication of Migration, Displacement, and Redress. I have been writing ongoing basis short articles, and we finally decided to make a collection of my essays. This is a 300 book, so it's hard to read perhaps, but if you have something in mind in your community activities, you might go through the index and you might find something related to your concern or activities or interest. So thank you very much for your interest in this humble publication. Thank you. And I would like to introduce my wife, Diane Kage. She has been supporting my endeavor for many decades. So, yeah, this is Diane.
Look at so many people. Look. Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Well, there. I should see a lot of people. Mikoto. Yes. Okay. During this event today, so thank you, Mama, and thank you, Papa. During this event today, we welcome viewers to enter any questions that you might have in the chat box, and please add your email. Because we have such a packed agenda, we may not get to your questions, but we will surely, in the short days to come, make sure that we can answer everyone's questions. And we are pleased to have special guests with us, most of whom have given us messages by recording in advance. This morning, we will enjoy comments from Judy Hanazawa, who is the president of the Greater Vancouver Japanese Canadian Citizens Association, and is, along with my parents, she is one of the founding members of the Human Rights Committee of the JCCA. Next, we have Dr. John Price is with us this morning, a longtime colleague of my father and a professor emeritus with the University of Victoria here in BC. He wrote the introduction to the book, and thank you very much for that, John. Carrie Coast with Electromagnetic Print. She is our publisher. John Greenaway, editor of the Bulletin, who has also interviewed my father twice in the Bulletin Journal about his previous books and about his life in human rights and as an immigrant from Japan to Canada. We're also lucky to have all the way from Japan, Satoko Norimatsu, who is the founder and director of the Peace Philosophy Center. Thekla Lit is with the Association for the Learning and Preservation of the History of World War II in Asia. Thekla has worked on several projects with the Human Rights Committee and my father over the years. Finally, we will be joined by Mikoto Yoshida, my son, all the way from Los Angeles, who wrote the foreword for the book and has played an important role in not only offering translation support, but also reviewing the manuscript along the way. So thank you. And to close our event today, we will have a master shakuhachi player, Alcvin, Ryuzen, Ramos from the Sunshine Coast, who will give us a traditional song. So we will have I want to introduce our first guest, Judy Hanazawa. I'm personally reminded how much I've learned from Judy alongside my father in the days that we organized community workshops together. And I really appreciate her many years of work with my father. Please help us to welcome Judy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Judy Hanazawa. This is an excerpt from Tatsuo's message upon accepting the National Association of Japanese Canadians, Dr. Gordon Hida 12. It is a challenge for us to deal with human rights issues relating to non-Japanese Canadian groups or other countries. I think that universal justice is a guiding principle. When either individual or group rights are violated or neglected, we have to speak up. How can we deal with issues directly relating to Japan? Some post-war immigrants may have an emotional tie with Japan, and they do not like to criticize whatever the Japanese government or people did. Further, there are some who prefer to maintain cordial or smooth relations with the embassy and consulate officials by avoiding contentious issues. Dealing with these issues, I believe we have to study them and make our own judgment. It is a continuous and sometimes difficult effort. On the other hand, sometimes we have to make a quick decision to express our own opinion or concern. There was an excellent example I would like to mention. When the September 11th incident occurred in 2001, the NAJC issued a press release on September 17th, within a week of the incident, stating that, I quote, "We must all speak out and be vigilant in opposing hateful actions and support those who are suffering fear of backlash and violence." In 2009, We had a conference at the Nikkei Center in Burnaby, BC, called Honoring Our People, supported by the NAJC. Many elders came and gave testimonies of their wartime ordeals. Younger generations also joined and heard for the first time the experience of older people. Such an event reminds us that the redress settlement, with the government's acknowledgement of unjust treatments of Japanese Canadians, was not a happy ending of a story. Rather, it marks a beginning for taking our awareness to a higher level. The recent event of the convocation of Japanese Canadian students in May this year at University of British Columbia illustrates that the wartime injustices could be remembered and dealt with even after 70 years. As we all know, once Japanese Canadians were profiled as enemy aliens, there is no guarantee that similar things won't happen again. Governments, administrations may again aim at controlling the public for their own convenience. We must resist the notion that an unusual situation warrants exceptional measures, including the violation of limitation of democratic rights. There is an obvious danger in such an approach. An exception may easily become the norm. I urge community leaders to get trained in human rights issues and provide information to the community at large. Personally, I have been interested in and studied the experience of Japanese Canadians who were moved to Japan after World War II. Their experience was as a result of heightened xenophobia or racial discrimination. Their citizenship was deprived, and they were deported to Japan after the war, a country that was foreign to many of them. There is no guarantee that such a thing would not happen again for individuals or minority groups. We have to be vigilant and work relentlessly to ensure access to human rights for all, regardless of their background or situation. So, Tatsuo's words in this speech describe the many ways we, as the committee, through Tatsuo's consistent application of a human rights focus, were able to address a variety of issues in the world, primarily to Japan's history as both a perpetrator and victim of inhumanities, and in Canada, BC, and in our own community. In today's time, with COVID-19 raising fears and stresses and emotional fatigue, Asian Canadians have been the target of racist attacks. We are learning today, despite the enactment of human rights law, all forms of racism continue to confront racialized communities, Indigenous and Black communities, other communities of color like ourselves. Tatsuo's closing words as he accepted the NAJC Human Rights Award 8 years ago speak clearly and so accurately about being vigilant, being relentless in maintaining human rights. When I consider the experience of participating with Tatsuo as a fellow member of the GVJCCA Human Rights Committee, I conclude with lots of gratitude that it was almost 30 years of learning the critical importance of seeing with a human rights lens, both in examining the world around us, but also the way I, as an individual, conduct all my relations with myself, family, friends, fellow Japanese Canadians, other communities, and generally with other human beings. I also witnessed Tatsuo's calm resolve and courage to stand consistently for what he felt was right. Thank you, Tatsuo, for all that you have given to uphold justice and human rights principles, and for setting an example for me and for so many others. Thank you.
Not yet. Thank you, Judy, so much. Actually, I'm reminded listening to Judy that as a parent and member of the community, that I have to be more vigilant to look for opportunities, teachable moments with our young people in our world, my children, you know, just asking questions about maybe the newcomers in their classroom or maybe about a neighbor, that these kinds of values and respect has to start at a young age. And the results of the lack of perhaps those kinds of important teachings in childhood often results in these racial attitudes as adults. Children observe adults. So Judy, I'm reminded of that, and thank you. I'd like to introduce now John, our next special guest. Besides his expertise in Asian Canadian studies, I also have great respect for his knowledge of the Japanese language and culture. And also, I really admire his activism. I'm immensely grateful for your 3 decades of friendship with my father and working together with him, especially in the project to develop the social studies curriculum for the BC Ministry of Education. We are pleased to welcome Dr. John Price.
Thanks so much, Mariko, and thank you, everybody. It's really an honor and a privilege to be with you today, to welcome into this world a book of insight and wisdom from a gentle man. It brings a message of hope at a time when we desperately need such a message. I'm speaking from Vancouver on the border with Burnaby, the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. I won't go on too long because I've already been given the space to talk about the book in the introduction, and I really look forward to getting a copy of the book in my hands. But I'd like to underscore how Tatsuo learned and used history in his life. Learning about what happened to Japanese Canadians in BC, he wasn't here, obviously, at the time that it happened. But what happened during the uprooting and internment was such that he decided to get involved in the redress movement in the 1980s, and he became a bridge between generations and countries because of his language skills and his empathy, and played an incredibly important role. He went on to become the Western coordinator to implement the redress agreement of 1988. And this brought him into touch with the 4,000 Japanese Canadians who had effectively been exiled to Japan after the war and remained there. He recounts how he traveled and made contact with a large number of Japanese Canadians in Japan, helping assure that redress reached them as well as Japanese Canadians in Canada. And through that experience, he collected the personal stories of a number of the exiles, some of which are contained in this anthology. He then supplemented the story with his own research and wrote a uniquely important contribution to Canadian and global history in his book Nikkei Kanadajin no Tsuiho, The Expulsion of Japanese Canadians, that was published first in Japanese and later in English in 2012. I want to say a few words also about Tatsuo's wonderful choice for a life partner. There's an old and I think outdated saying that behind every great man is a great woman. Well, Diane was never behind Tatsuo. She stood side by side with him and at times in front. To illustrate this point, I'd like to show you this book. I hope you can see it. Its title is The Colonial Present, The Rule of Ignorance and the Role of Law in British Columbia by none other than Carrie Coast, who is the publisher of Tatsuo's book and the host of this morning's launch. So if you turn inside the cover, it's inscribed, and you may not be able to read it, so I will read it out loud. It says, "To John Price from Diane Kage on behalf of Carrie Coast." Diane was way ahead of her time, and her willingness to prod me nearly a decade ago to consider the plight of Indigenous peoples in British Columbia is testimony to just how tall she really stands. On a more personal note, I want to thank Tatsuo for coming into my life when he did. We may have met in the 1980s at Mosaic, but the first time we really connected was in the early 90s when union folks at the Vancouver airport accused Japan Airlines of racism for putting all people of South Asian heritage at the back of the plane. Though my background was in Japanese history and I spoke Japanese, I was doing labor education at Capilano College at the time. So Tatsuo thought I might be able to help mediate and organized a meeting with the head of Japan Airlines Vancouver office to discuss the situation. Of course, I was next to useless, and Tatsuo had vastly overrated my abilities. But his vote of confidence in me was really powerful at the time and prodded me to be not just an academic, but to get engaged in social activism. Thank you, Tatsuo, for such a wonderful book and for being such a wonderful mentor. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you, John, for your heartfelt message for all of us. And we are really, really happy that you've been a good friend to my father. Next, I'm pleased to present our special guests, Carrie Coast, followed by John Endo Greenaway. I've known Kerry for over 20 years, and our children belong to the St'át'imc Nation. I first actually met Kerry by the banks of the Fraser River in Lillooet when both our children were toddlers. And our children actually are also cousins. So I'm really happy to have Kerry take on such a huge role. And next, right after Kerry, we have John Endo Greenaway. Over the last few decades, John is the one that's been serving a vital role in documenting the Japanese Canadian communities' activities and personalities through the monthly bulletin, which now reaches across the country. So we are pleased to welcome our special messages from Kerry and John. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate the launch of Tetsuo Kage's work. My name is Carrie Coast. I'm with the publisher Electromagnetic Print, and I need to start by saying how humbling it is to get to publish Tatsuo's book. He's a wonderful author, he's a wonderful subject, and he joins some other fabulous human rights and peace activists and artists on the label. So thank you, Tatsuo. I had the singular privilege of working with Tatsuo and Mariko in developing the manuscript and selecting the articles. And what I want you to know is that this is not just a collection of old articles. This collection is a key to safety and equality in difference. And that's why it's so important, especially for us here in Canadian society, where people from all over the world are living side by side with people who historically they have been at odds with or even at war with, and in some cases ongoing. Even all Canadians are still in conflict with Indigenous peoples over the land rights and the obvious redress issues there. But this collection, and I'm not going to read a particular selection for you, I am going to read from the table of contents, so you can see what a fabulous range this sensitive and insightful and so intelligent documentation of the Japanese Canadian community's journey is, and how it provides for us all the things that are important to a community to stick together, and all the things that are important about us sticking up for ourselves and sticking up for others. Let's see. There are articles about language here. In fact, it starts with an article about language called You and Me. And so those ideas and those words are expressed very differently in Japan to the way that they are in Canada and in English. Then there's an article, Yes and No. because again, those are words attached to ideas which are used very differently in conversation. There's a brief to the British Columbia Ministry of Education when they were developing their multicultural policy for schools, and Tatsuo was a big part of that. There are various reports here to the Multilingual Orientation Service Association for Immigrant Communities, which Tatsuo works with. And in all these articles, many of them which he contributed to the Greater Vancouver Japanese Canadian Citizens Association newspaper, the Bulletin, and Geppo, which he wrote in Japanese and English at different times and did translation for them, they really speak to the importance of culture and the importance of all the different kinds of supports that an immigrant community needs. So there's articles here about legal rights. There's articles here about education and the role of parents and the school system and the school board. There's articles about family in Japan for the People's Law School, which Tatsuo was very involved with. There's some wonderful scripts, actually. There's an adaptation of a Japanese ghost story, which goes to the issue of redress. And along with one of his colleagues, he developed an immigrant Nisei dialogue. So between a new immigrant to the Japanese Canadian community and someone who was born here. And it's very interesting just to have that played out and see what how a community which arrives in this different place at different times, how do people relate to each other and what are their needs from each other and what do they offer each other. There is also an article called Intergenerational Conflict and Cooperation, going to that theme. There are several articles going into the history of immigration and the challenges that the Japanese Canadian community faced. Most significantly, Japanese Canadians were made enemies of the state during World War II, and they were interned, they were dispossessed, they were displaced, and in many cases they were coerced into exile, into returning to Japan, where many of them had never been at that point. The overall theme of this collection speaks to living together, and we need to be able to be ourselves, and we need to stick up for ourselves like the Japanese Canadian community did. They pursued with great discipline a redress settlement from the Canadian government, and they then accepted that, and they then carried on and made a space for themselves and are a hugely important part of today's Canada and today's British Columbia. And of course, they were a founding community here on the West Coast. So with that, I would just like to leave you with this thought. And I've said it once, but I'm just going to repeat that. I believe that this book and this collection of articles and insights into one immigrant community's experience is a great teaching tool for all of us. That we don't have time to all put ourselves through the kinds of things that Japanese Canadian community went through and faced, and the kinds of things that the Indigenous peoples are going through here and are facing. We need to listen to each other's stories and take them into ourselves, take them into our heart, and let them be our own. And we have to live together with dignity and respect. And so with that, thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to thank the other speakers for lending their wonderful intelligence and meaningful experiences to this celebration of the launch and recognizing Tatsuo's great work. Thank you all, and good luck.
Hi, this is John Greenaway. I'm the editor of the Bulletin magazine. And I basically grew up without much connection to the Japanese Canadian community until when I was 18, I joined a band called Kokoho Rose. And suddenly I was part of the community, and I met a lot of people in a very short amount of time. And one of the people I met was Kage-san. And as someone new to the community, it was I wasn't quite sure why he was Kage-san, and everyone else was just Take and Michiko and Mayu, and I knew that he was an immigrant, a newer immigrant, and but Take was Take and Michiko was Michiko, and Kage-san was Kage-san, and it's just the way it was, and I realized over time that it was because he engendered a certain respect in the community, and I think that's just a reflection of who he is and the work he did and continues to do in the community. And I've always had a lot of respect for Tatsuo, for Kage-san, for the strength of his beliefs, and I know they're not always popular beliefs, but he operates with a really strong moral code, and I think that's really admirable. And he's been involved in this community longer than I have, and he's always at the meetings. He's always speaking up. He's always doing the right thing, and I think that it's great that he's finally got this book. I know he's been thinking about it for a long time, and I'm very pleased that he's able to do it and that it's about to be published. And congratulations from me and from everyone at the Bulletin. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And first, Kerry, I need to mention that initially we were planning to my father and I were talking about doing his memoir, living in two worlds in Japan and Canada. And it was Kerry that convinced us that no, there are so many themes such as migration, injustices, reconciliation that strikes a chord with some of the very critical global issues today. And so that's how, with Kerry's suggestion, my father settled to the title, Migration, Displacement, and Redress. I'm really grateful for her gifts and editing and publishing, which made this project possible, and our dream has come true. Here it is. And thank you, John Endo Greenaway, for providing an amazing platform for all these years for so many of my father's articles in the Bulletin. Next, I'd like to move into welcome Satoko Norimatsu. She's an amazing role model for me as she offers her fearless voice of conscience, actively writing articles in both Japan for Japanese chronicles and in English here and in her blogs. She offers us a very special bilingual message.
Hello from Tokyo, Japan. 影さん、新刊のご出版、心からおめでとうございます。影さんを尊敬する者の一人としても、とても誇りに思います。また、マリコさんが本当にこの本の編集に大変な力を注いだことを垣間見て、このような親子関係は羨ましいなと思う次第です。私も93歳の父親にこのようなことがしてあげられたらいいなと思います。Kage-san, congratulations for the publication of your new book. I'm so proud of you and for Mariko-san's tireless efforts to put this together. I feel envious of such a close teamwork of a parent and a child. I wish I could do something like that for my 93-year-old father too. 私が最初に影さんに会ったのは2004年、バンクーバーに9条の会を作ろうとしていた時でした。憲法9条は日本の戦後憲法の平和条項で戦争と武力の放棄を謳っています。当時、日本の保守政府と米国がこれを変えて日本が普通の国になって 戦争ができるようにしようという動きを強めており、9条の会はこれに抗う運動でした。私たちの会は海外では初めてに近い9条の会だったと思います。I first met Kage-san in 2004 as he and I were both part of the group to prepare for the establishment of an Article 9 group in Vancouver. Article 9 refers to the peace clause in the post-World War II Constitution of Japan that pledges renunciation of war and war potential. There was a growing pressure from the conservative government of Japan and the United States to change the constitution so that Japan would be a quote-unquote normal country that could wage war against other countries. And we were part of the larger movement to resist such constitutional revision. In our understanding, we were one of the first, if not the first, Article 9 advocacy groups outside of Japan. 振り返ってみれば、あれから16年間、影さんはいつも平和と正義、歴史的和解のための私の活動を支持してくださり、大変な時も励ましてくださいました。例えば、2015年、日本からの移民コミュニティの中で、戦時の日本軍による性奴隷制度の被害者を記憶する像の建立に反対する運動が起こったとき、私はそれを批判したことで、右翼的日本政府とその支持者たちから影響を受けて右傾化してきた日本移民コミュニティの中で後ろ指を刺され、孤立するような時もありました。Looking back, for 16 years since then, Kage-san has always been there for me. He has always encouraged and supported my work for peace, justice, and historical reconciliation, even when the going got tough. For example, back in 2015, when I criticized the movement within the Japanese immigrant community that opposed the erection of the statue to remember the victims of the wartime sexual slavery by the Japanese military, I was finger-pointed and almost ostracized within the Japanese immigrant community, which was tilting to the right under the influence of the right-wing, history-denying Japanese government and its supporters. その時、日系社会で同じような問題意識を持っていた人は大変少なかったですが、影さんはその一人でした。私は2009年に、当時私が主催していたピースフィロソフィーサロンに影さんにゲストスピーカーとして来ていただきましたが、その時影さんは戦時下に軍国少年として育っていた自分が日本の敗戦で全てが変わったことを語り、例として黒塗り教科書の写真を見せてくれたことを思い出しました。私は影さんのそのような幼少期の体験により、集団的圧力、それは政府の圧力だったり、周りの人たちの圧力だったりしますが、そのような圧力に負けず、自分の信条を貫く、とりわけ弱者の人権を守ることにおいては、強い信念を貫くという力を身につけられたのではないかと思っています。Kage-san was one of the very few like-minded colleagues within the Japanese immigrant and Japanese Canadian communities. I remember when I hosted him as a guest speaker at my Peace Philosophy Salon back in 2009. Kage-san talked about his childhood under the war and how he was raised as a military-minded young boy, but Japan's defeat in the war changed everything, including the school textbooks in which all war-related content was erased with black ink. I believe such experience taught him the importance of resisting collective pressures, including those from government authorities and those from peers, and standing by one's belief, particularly where human rights of vulnerable people were concerned. そういうこともあって、影さんと私はコミュニティの中で反日分子であるかのごとくにセットで語られることもありますが、それに逆に誇りを感じているくらいです。昨年、バンクーバーの日本総領事館を訪問したとき、日本の過去の加害行為を平和と和解のために記憶しようとする行為を影さんと私が支持していることが日本政府にとって不都合なんでしょう。そのことを問題視されました。 対照的だったのが、2010年、ジョイ・コガーさんが日本政府から勲章をもらいましたが、日本総領事公邸で行った受賞スピーチにおいて、ジョイさんは開口一番、影さんと私の平和と正義のための仕事について語ってくださいました。So I take pride in the fact that Kage-san and I are often grouped together as anti-Japanese government elements in the community. When I visited the Consul General of Japan in Vancouver last year, they specifically expressed concern over Kage-san and me because our support for the memorialization of Japan's past atrocities for the purpose of peace and reconciliation was inconvenient for the Japanese government. On the contrary, Joy Kogawa, when she received an honorary medal from the Japanese government in 2010, first acknowledged Kage-san and me for our work for peace and justice in her acceptance speech given at the Consul General's official residence. Kage-san, これからも影さんからいろいろなことを学び、いろいろなことを一緒にやっていきたいと思います。年明けにはカナダに戻りますので、ぜひお会いしたいです。重ね重ね、新刊本の出版をおめでとうございます。私をこの素晴らしいお祝いの機会に招いてくださり、ありがとうございました。影さん、I hope to continue to work with you, learn from you, and enjoy friendship with you. When I return to Canada early next year, I would love to visit. Again, congratulations for the new book, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this celebration.
さとこさん、どうもありがとうございます。I'm greatly comforted in knowing that Satoko has so much in common with my father. I so appreciate your leadership, Satoko-san, and all the work that she does. I'm very grateful. I'd like to now share a little bit of why I've come to become involved in this project with putting the book together. About 8 years ago, it was actually my mother who prompted me that all this paperwork and boxes and files need to be organized better. And so this became my summer project and a task. And I would dig up volumes and volumes of correspondence, project notes, committee meeting minutes, flyers and letters and reports and things like that, of course, articles. So digging through the archive was almost like a treasure hunt for me. I would find really old letters, even the letter that my dad wrote to my mom, you know, a long time ago, and back and forth, and also some really beautiful old pictures. But I also couldn't help notice the original writings that my father has had. So those got put together in special binders over the years, and we have about 8 binders. And so that housekeeping project actually became a result of the creation of this book. As a teenager, though, I'm not sure if my dad remembers me, but I used to peek into his study, and where his bookshelves were just filled with topics on Nazi Germany. And I would ask him, like, Papa, どうしてヒトラーのこと勉強するの? Why do you have all these books about Hitler? And he would just typically, you know, won't take his eye off his papers and just say sane, which is a Japanese word for I wonder, you know. And so he was very evasive, and I would get kind of disappointed and decide to leave the absent-minded professor alone. But after some failed attempts, my father finally gave me his answer. And that explanation really stuck with me. He says, well, since Japan was a close ally with Hitler Germany, I wondered if what happened in Germany could possibly also happen in Japan. And so I started researching. So in the 1980s, I remember my father just crouched down, sitting on the floor of his home library with a paper cutter and glue stick and scissors. And he was editing and assembling the monthly newsletter, the old-fashioned way, as the founder of the Japanese Immigrants Association. And over the years, he kept making special panels for the festival where he likes to have the big Human Rights Committee booth displays to educate the public. So, and I did join my parents' Human Rights Committee back in 1997, and I was really triggered by the different cases of workers and immigrants being exploited. So that was a real eye-opener for me. But I would have to say the most powerful experience working with my father was in 1998, when the Human Rights Committee worked with Alpha in presenting and welcoming the delegates from that were peace activists from Japan and from China to educate the people about the medical experiments in Harbin province in China called Unit 731. So I learned from listening to the Chinese victims and others at that press conference that this Chinese victim told her story about how her own relatives are still dying and suffering from the virus that has been incubated in Unit 731, which had been discarded into the local rivers after Japan was defeated. So listening firsthand, I was deeply moved by these testimonies and also learned about the long-term harm that was done to the innocent Chinese people. I'm a mother of children with combined ancestry of Japanese, European, First Nations, and also Chinese. As such, I really sincerely wish for my children and the future generation to correctly learn the history of their predecessors. So while painting the landscape of community development and community building, and how to overcome injustices of the past, my father, through his collection, also leaves us with the challenge to dive into our own moral landscape. And when I asked my father just recently, if you had a message for your readership, his readership, after a long pause, he replied, "I want to ask people to look deep inside themselves and ask who and what they are and how do they relate to the world." Thank you. Now I'm pleased to welcome our last two speakers, and thank you for your patience. Those speakers who contributed to our book project, Thekla Lit of Alpha and Mikoto Yoshida. Thekla, as I mentioned earlier, is the chairperson of the BC chapter of Alpha, who's been collaborating with the Human Rights Committee and is the co-recipient of the End Racism Award from the BC provincial government. And then we will be also followed by my son, Mikoto Yoshida from Los Angeles, who will share a few words with us. Please, we are very pleased to welcome Thekla Lit.
My name is Thekla Lit. I'm the co-founder and co-chair of Canada Alpha, which stands for the Association for Learning and Preserving the History of World War II in Asia, and I'm also the president of BC Alpha. Alpha's mandate is to advocate for and foster global human rights and peace through the learning and preserving of historical facts about the atrocities committed by the Japanese Imperial Army against civilians and unarmed soldiers during World War II in Asia, which occurred between 1931 and 1945. We also support the just and overdue redress for victims of the Asian Holocaust. I would first like to thank Tatsuo for including me into the launch of his new book, Migration, Displacement, and Redress, a Japanese-Canadian Perspective. I would like to highlight his writings about the project A Glimpse of Reconciliation, which was co-organized by Canada Alpha and the Human Rights Committee of Japanese Canadian Citizens Association, JCCA, in 1998. It was a touring witnessing forum and photo exhibit relating to the lawsuit filed by victims of Unit 731 biological warfare. The event was held in 6 North American cities. In March 1999, this project, A Glimpse of Reconciliation, was recognized by the government of British Columbia with an End Racism Award. You can learn more about this project by reading some of the selected writings included in Tatsuo's new book. Here, I would like to read out some passages from 2 selected articles to demonstrate the kind of both subtle and explicit pressures Tetsuo endured when trying to uphold the principle of human rights for all. In the article, A Glimpse of Reconciliation receives Enrichment Award from BC government, Tetsuo wrote, quote, "Looking back, we think that community members firmly believe in our mandate and saw it as universal in nature when they initiated efforts to achieve redress for Japanese Canadians. And indeed, our efforts were supported by many Canadians of various backgrounds, including First Nations, Chinese, and other Asian Canadians. It was unfortunate that our national organization, the NAJC, declined our request for endorsing the project of Unit 731 Forum and exhibit. For some Japanese Canadians, it seems to be more important not to offend the Japanese government and big business than to affirm their Canadian citizenship by standing with victims of past injustice and supporting the demand for apology and compensation. On Enjiri, the Japanese traditional virtue of obligation, often mentioned by Nesse elders, seem to be conveniently forgotten when other people's rights become an issue." Unquote. In the article, Rights for All Humans, Tetsuo wrote about the queries from Mr. Jiro Hamanaka, whose view probably represented a good fraction of the Japanese community. He criticized JCCA Human Rights Committee's joint effort with Chinese and other ethnic groups on the issue of Unit 731 and the Nanking Massacre. In his view, the constitution of JCCA does not include JCCA jumping into support human rights movement of non-Japanese Canadians. He asked if permission to receive the Enrichment Award was obtained from the JCCA board. Mr. Hamanaka even queried whether JCCA would lose members because JCCA's criticism towards the Japanese government. Tetsuo responded to each of the above queries, and I would like to read out Tetsuo's response, particularly to the last query. Quote, "It is true that the membership of the JCCA has been declining. In addition to the aging of its members, it has chronically lacked active programming for its members. We committee members would simply say that we have been involved with activities which as citizens of Canada are appropriate to deal with. Also, our activities are attracting new members who are interested in our work. Indeed, some community members join our committees because of our activities, and some others gave us donations in appreciation of our work. The members of the delegation of the Witnessing Forum in July 1998 were representatives of those Japanese people who are conscientious and critical of the Japanese government's policies. Our committee has been supporting these people, but it doesn't mean that we are anti-Japanese or are critical of the people and culture in general of our ancestral land. We firmly believe that unless Japan can liquidate its past debts, that is, unless dealing sincerely with the war responsibility and compensation issues, Japanese people can never attain true friendship with the people of Asian and Pacific regions. Without that, we can hardly expect to have reconciliation and harmony with other Asian groups in Canada. Our activities are, in a sense, contributing to an important grassroots level exchange and understanding between Canada and Japan." Unquote. In fact, the pressure didn't only come from individuals within his community. Tetsuo was a member of the writing team of the Teacher's Guide, Human Rights in the Asia Pacific, 1931 to 1945, Social Responsibility and Global Citizenship, which supports senior high school students in learning about the Asian Holocaust. This resource guide was developed by the BC Ministry of Education with BC Alpha as an invited partner. During its development, Tetsuo was under pressure from the then Consul General of the Japanese Consulate in Vancouver. Yet, he continued that work with extraordinary and unshakable resilience. My recent experience of being criticized as anti-China by my own community due to my support for the Hong Kongers' struggle for freedom and democracy has made me understand much better the impact of such pressure from one's own community. Fortunately, I can look to Tatsuo as my role model when facing such challenges. Thank you, Tatsuo.
Hello, thank you for sharing your time here with us today and being in this space. My name is Mikoto Yoshida, and I'll be giving my thoughts and reflections as well as reading some excerpts from my grandfather Tetsuo Kage's book, Migration, Displacement, and Redress. I want to first start with a land acknowledgement. I'm present here today while residing on the traditional lands of the Tongva, Kich, and Chumash people. We acknowledge Indigenous people whose knowledge and culture has laid the foundation for the community we hold together, and the importance of remembering our past by centering Indigenous voices and history in our daily reflection, education, and activism. So first, who is Tetsuo Kage? This is our family, a snapshot of it at least. And we, as you can see, are very diverse and multicultural. We share heritages of Japanese, Canadian, American, First Nation, and various European backgrounds. This is me here in the middle. In my previous life, I was a US Marine officer. I deployed 3 times to Afghanistan. Then I spent about 4 to 5 years in the financial industry in New York. And most recently, I've been working on research on the Japanese-American internment with Professor Duncan Williams, who wrote American Sutra, which chronicled the story of Buddhism as well as Japanese-American experience during the World War II internment period. I'm going to first begin with an excerpt that I believe summarizes some of the main key takeaways from my grandfather's book. He writes, Japanese people need to support the belief that the true interest of the Japanese nation lies in assuming responsibility for the damages inflicted on peoples of the Asia and Pacific regions, so that Japanese people can live with neighboring nations with mutual trust and harmony. And to this, I read this as so. All people need to support the belief that the true interest of every nation lies in assuming responsibility for the damages inflicted on the peoples throughout history, so that all people can live with neighboring nations with mutual trust and harmony. So as I read this book, I thought about my own concepts and ideals of the national exceptionalism, patriotism, citizenship, especially my previous life as a Marine officer, going to war, and working in the financial industry. And some of the key takeaways from my reading of my grandfather's text is societal imperative to do the following: to challenge oppressive narratives, to question history, to advocate for human rights, to fight for the community, and to hold governments and institutions accountable when it seems almost impossible to do so. And the final point here is opting out is not an option. And what that means to me is that you cannot just study this, you need to take action, you need to do something. And whatever that activism may mean for you may be different, but the point is that you need to do something. And that's why I like this photo of my grandfather who's, in action. And I highlighted some of the words here of these action words of challenging and advocating. And ultimately this change from national, racial, ethnic, cultural, socioeconomic boundaries that divide us all into this concept of global citizenship, which my grandfather talks through in his book. So I'm going to read an excerpt that he wrote in 2003 that I believe is still relevant today. He writes, in the post 9/11 era of escalating international confrontation and growing racism, how can we overcome bigotry, protect human rights, and prevent war? 60 years ago, racism, sexism, militarism, and imperialism ignited a lethal war in the Asia-Pacific region that saw terrible crimes committed against humanity. The Japanese Imperial Army inflicted immense atrocities. To prevent such atrocities, global citizenship requires that we learn from this terrible past. It is time for the diverse communities in Canada to come together for wounds to heal, for reconciliation to take firm root, and for history's costly lessons to be passed on to a younger generation. How can we organize to assure justice for past victims to prevent crimes against humanity now? And so finally, my key takeaways from reading through his text is that human rights and activism isn't just for one type of people or for one marginalized group. It spans across all intersectionalities, and we cannot fight for the rights of just some people. We must acknowledge our wrongs in order to work towards a better future. It's actually part of being a normal human being to be able to acknowledge our faults and work towards progress. And finally, we must do more than just talk about it. We need to find our own way into manifesting this activism. This can be done, through frontline protests, through writing and chronicling those efforts, to petitioning, and to being a member of a community that seeks to uplift each other and ensure that we're all in this together and fighting together. And so I'd like to close with awareness, acknowledgement, and gratitude. Awareness for the work that my grandfather and my ancestors have done in this space. Acknowledgement of the work that I need to do, and acknowledgement of the work that we want to prepare our future generations to do as we continue this fight for human rights and progress in society globally. And finally, gratitude for not just my grandfather who has done this work, but for my mother, Mariko, my aunts, Eileen, Elisa, and my uncle Kenji, who have worked to codify the legacy of their father, my grandfather, and to give us a gift of his history, of his legacy, and for inspiration to make sure that we have somewhere to go to see not just our own personal history, but imperatives and challenges that we should examine as we go through our lives. And so finally, I want to thank everybody that's here for sharing this space with us, for sharing your time, and for being aware and present with us today. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everybody. Thekla, Mikoto, Judy, John Greenaway, and I am very pleased that for my book launch, you participated and made very thoughtful comments for your impression with my past work, which more or less came out as a book from this migration, displacement, and redress. I am very, very pleased that without your support, this cannot happen. And I'm sure that not among friends and somebody who knows very well, but the general public in the community here and in Japan and other countries could look at it, and I hope they will find something relevant for their own experience to relate to their own experience. So I'm very pleased that this book came out and with your support. And I hope if you have time, please read through this book, even though different aspects it's compiled together. So as a book, it's not that easy to read, but you might find something interesting, not whole book, but some parts in the book you can relate to my own experience of migration, displacement, and redress. So thank you very much for your support, and I hope you enjoy somehow the reading my recent publication. Thank you very much for your support, and please let's keep our friendship for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Papa. 皆さんどうもありがとう。Papa ありがとう。I want to thank everybody for being here. And we are now reaching the end of our official broadcast of the launch of the book. And I want to inform you that the recording of this launch for some of our friends and family that may not have been able to join, it will be available on the website, Electromagnetic Print. And I want to especially thank the special guests who've prepared a message for today. All of you, thank you. And after our ending performance by Alcvin, the Zoom event will remain open for a little bit of open discussion. So if you'd like to share your comment or any greetings, exchange messages with each other or anyone that's still joining us, you're most welcome to stay on. And I want to thank you for all your time. And lastly, but not least, this book is available. This book is available on print, ebook, and in PDF class sets for educators who may wish to use it in their classes. So please see the website to make those purchases. And I'd also like to, at this time, express my special thanks to Norm Leach, who has made this event possible by helping us stream our broadcast, and for all your technical support. Thank you, Norm. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here today, for listening, and for sending your good thoughts and feelings. I'd like to wish you all a very safe and happy season and beyond. And finally, I'd like to now welcome a special broadcast to you from Master Shakuhachi player, Alcvin Ryuzen Ramos.
Hello, my name is Alcvin Ryuzen Ramos, and I am a Shakuhachi player living on the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia, Canada, on the ancestral lands of the Squamish, the Shishla, the Tlamian, and the Klahoose peoples. And today I want to thank you, everybody, for joining and viewing this amazing and wonderful book launch of Tatsuo Sensei's book. And I'm very honored to be part of this event, playing for you guys. And the piece I'm going to be playing is called Kyomukaze, which means the empty wind, and it is inspired by the trips I take with my students every couple of years through Japan, where we play shakuhachi. We connect with the teachers, the masters, the monks, the sacred spaces, the onsens, the food, everything. And we connect and we share our love of Japan and shakuhachi throughout the country. And this is the piece, Kyomukaze. Please enjoy the empty wind. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you once again for Tatsuo Sensei and his wonderful book. And thank you, Mariko-san, for inviting me. I'm very honored to be part of this event. Be safe and have a wonderful, wonderful fall. And please enjoy the book. Take care.
Thank you, Alcvin. That was a perfect ending for a really special event. And now we invite any comments and questions from many friends and special guests. And you may unmute yourself as you like and speak through your voice or through the chat. I'm not gonna open reception. Hi, Nico. Hi, Andy.
Hi. Hi. Congratulations, Grandpapa. Congratulations.
That's Mariko's daughter and two grandchildren.
Yes, they're my father's great grandchildren from Los Angeles, Redondo Beach.
Los Angeles, Redondo Beach. Omedetou.
Arigato, Kana-chan. Thank you, Andy, Nico. Sako-san も来てるの。ありがとう、Sako-san。
影さんお元気そうでよかったです。
どうもありがとうございます。参加していただいてありがとうございます。
いえいえ、もう全然お会いできないからよかったです、お会いできて。元気そうな姿を見れて。マリコさん頑張ったね。
Well, I think my dad did all the writing and my mom helped with editing and put the puzzle together. So that was
yeah. And then like you had all the help from your talented family, right? From Taiko and all like yeah. And I'm so glad your son is in San Francisco and you know starting his kind of new life. ねよかった。
Sako-san, I'm so grateful you are supporting the Vancouver Article 9 group. I wish I lived in Vancouver. I will be with you in those groups with you and Satoko. So I have so much admiration for the activism in the cities. It's easier with this. So and all of you here in each of your ways, like doing the work that you're doing. Too many to mention.
So Mariko and Tatsuo, it's Judy. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. I just want to say that I also feel like Tatsuo, your legacy is in good hands from the messages you've gotten from Mariko and the children, Miko, and you know, like it's true. Your children and your family, your grandchildren are going to carry on with the same pursuit of human rights, you know, in society. And I think I just want to say too, that I feel really happy and grateful that I've had this relationship with Tatsuo for all these years. And you've certainly taught me a lot. There are still things to get done, I know, and things that aren't resolved. But your steadiness about what is the right way to go and how human beings should be with each other, I think it has been a really, really good foundation for me particularly. So I want to say thank you. And I want to say how much I appreciate the hope that was in this event today, that things are carrying on. The younger people are moving ahead. Everybody, you know, that vision of seeing things through human rights lens is very, very clear. So I'm so happy about that. And so thank you so much. I've got to be signing off now, so I wanted to say that before I left. Thank you.
My dad wanted to respond to you, Judy.
Oh, Judy, thank you very much for your comment. I think your point that for the young, our link with younger people is a key, one of the key issues for our future. And I think it's very appropriate that you mentioned about that point. I think in my personal level, we have children and grandchildren and so on. And I think we are not just a family, but we are also bounded by the common issues, common interests. So I think it was very important to continue our relations with the younger generations and relatives. Thank you.
Okay, I agree with that completely. Thank you, Tetsuo. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi.
Anybody else for comment?
Thank you, Judy.
I would just like to say hi to everybody. I want to say hi to Ron, who showed up. That's wonderful. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Lisa.
And she had to leave a little while ago, but Sandra from Colorado Springs. She's my partner in the caregiving course or end of life support course that I'm taking. So I was really happy to see Sandra. She's an author as well. And I'm so thrilled to see my niece and nephew. Hi, Kana-chan. Hi, Miko. Miko, thanks for all the work you did in putting together presentation, and you look really good and your message was really appropriate. And my grand nephews too, Andy and Nico. Really great to see everybody. Okay.
I'd like to, this is Ron George here. I'd like to thank Tatsuo for the launch of his book. And at this time, I would like to acknowledge the role that the Japanese Canadian Citizenship Association played in the Indigenous veterans attempt at redress. It happened around the same time, and when the Aboriginal Veterans Association BC chapter was first beginning to revive and seek redress, Japanese citizenship, Japanese Canadian citizenship was right there beside us, helping us out. And at this time, I would like to acknowledge that and thank you very much for everything that you helped us with. As well, Deanne helped us with bringing over 21 Indigenous veterans to Europe to commemorate the 45th anniversary of D-Day. And she did all the work and the logistics that got us over there for a period of about 2 weeks. And it was the most enriching and healing experience for the veterans to go back and see how the Europeans really appreciated the role of the Canadian soldiers in their liberation. And they were treated with like royalty over there, something they never, ever felt over in their own country. And to this, I'd like to acknowledge the role that everyone in your community played towards that. And sadly, the attempts at redress didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. The Canadian government, after a study on how to deal with the Indigenous Canadians who weren't acknowledged after the war, they did a study with the Senate a Senate committee, which was chaired by the late Senator Len Marchand, and the outcome of it was that they did agree to pay Indigenous veterans $20,000, but only to status Indian veterans. So they didn't seize the opportunity to be honorable at all. Instead, they entrenched racism and bigotry in Canada by only recognizing 20% of the Aboriginal veterans who went to war. The other 80% who live off reserve were not acknowledged, the Métis and non-status Indians, just the status Indian veterans. So there's still some work to do, and I don't know if anyone will be doing that work now that the off-reserve organizations for Indigenous people have been silenced and or remain dormant at this time. So it's really a pleasure to see Tatsuo and your family doing the work that you're doing. And I couldn't bypass the opportunity to acknowledge the huge role you played in helping us out at a time when it wasn't a very popular topic in Canada. And there are a lot of the final thing I'd like to say is the veterans that Diane helped go over to Europe were primarily Métis and non-status Indians. And so as a result of the government's attitude and policy towards off-reserve Indians, most of those veterans have not been acknowledged by Canada. In particular, my uncles, Andrew and Fred George. Fred was in Normandy. Their lands have been wrongfully claimed by other people in our nation because of the fact that we are off reserve. So apartheid is alive and well in Canada, and I hope to articulate that in an upcoming book that I'm hoping to publish as well with Kerry. You're the same publisher you have. So reconciliation in Canada is just a dream for us. It won't happen until Canada finds out what they've done and are still doing to 80% of the population who do not live on Indian reserves. They choose to call those people First Nations. And those of us off reserve don't qualify to be First Nations because of where we live. That's a legal situation we have to deal with. So your book inspires people like us, and I look forward to reading it. And thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Oh. Oh, thank you very much for your comments. I'm very pleased that you get together to talk about what you perceived, and I'm very pleased that to hear from you all, and I hope we can keep our good relations in future as well. Thank you very much.
Feel free to share for a couple more minutes. We'll be almost lunchtime, so anyone else? Few comments before we say goodbye. Thank you for all the wonderful comments, even on the chat box.
I just would like to thank Tatsuo Kage san for being such having such principles, honesty, tirelessness, and humanity, deep humanity. And I'd like to thank Diane for her friendship with my father. And I'd like to thank Mariko, Eileen, and Elisa, and the rest of the family and your children for carrying on this torch at a very frightening time in the world. And you have you've earned such great respect. And I'm very honored to have worked with you on different issues. And I look forward to us all working together on as we confront the world that is not very humane or governed by the human rights. Although I think the social movements in the United States have shown what we can do when we come together and rise up. So thank you so much for being in my life, Tatsuo. Arigatou gozaimashita.
Also, Ellen, thank you very much for your kind comment. And I'm very, very pleased that you are with us this morning. Thank you for your participation, and let's stay in touch in future as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. With this, I'd like to we'll say goodbye for now, and have a safe season. Thank you so much, everyone. ありがとうございました。皆さん、お疲れ様。Thank you, Ellen, for everybody's hard work.
Okay.
もういいね。バイバイ。Be well.
Bye.
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 Love you. Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Nico. Thank you, Andy. またね。
またね。
久子さんありがとう。
はい。かなちゃんも元気でよかった。
Thank you, Norm. お疲れ様。Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Aripe. Thank you, Thekla. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Rito. Keep in touch.
Have a good rest.
Lunch time. お昼ご飯の時間だね。
Go take a good nap.
Okay. 終わったね。もういい？わからない。おご飯にする？